Okay, hi, Mr. Frank, thank you for coming. I just wanted to mention as something that I've noticed a few blogs are talking about on the internet, that these banks all across the country are overvaluing their assets, their mortgages that they hold on their books. And I've actually been to a few foreclosure auctions, and I've noticed that banks are buying back houses from themselves in order to have it, to prevent themselves from having to mark down the value of these assets. And they're basically lying to us about their solvency. And this is all made possible by the Federal Reserve lending money to these institutions. And I just want to ask you, when will you put H.R. 1207, the bill to audit the Fed, up for a vote in the committee? Thank you very much.
I completely disagree that the Fed is the cause of this, but yes, I have been pushing for more openness in the Fed back when the Democrats were in power and Henry Gonzalez, and we did get some of it. Here's what we plan to do. I want to restrict the powers of the Federal Reserve in a number of ways. First of all, they will be the major losers of power if we are successful, as I believe we will be, in setting up that Financial Product Protection Commission. The Federal Reserve is now charged with protecting consumers. They were supposed to do subprime mortgage restriction. Congress in 1994 gave the Federal Reserve the power to adopt rules to ban bad subprime mortgages. Alan Greenspan refused to do it. He said that was too much market intervention. They have the power to ban credit card abuses. They have the power to deal with overdrafts. They, under Greenspan, did nothing. Under Bernanke, they started to do things, but only after Congress started. When I became chairman of the committee, we began to act on these things. Subprime mortgages, credit cards, overdrafts. In every case, after we started, the Fed did. So that's one of the reasons why in the new Consumer Protection Agency, we will take away from the Federal Reserve the power to do consumer protection. Secondly, they have had since 1932 a right, under Herbert Hoover and the Democratic Congress combined, the right that they hadn't used until recently to intervene in the economy almost whenever they thought. Last September, the Federal Reserve came to us and said that they were going to advance $82 billion to AIG. I was kind of surprised and said, you have $82 billion. Mr. Bernanke said, I have $800 billion. Under Section 13.3 of the Federal Reserve Act, they can lend money to anybody they want. We are going to curtail that lending power. We are going to put some restraints on it. Finally, we will subject them to complete audit. I've been working with Ron Paul, who's the main sponsor of that bill. He agrees that we don't want to have the audit appear as if it is influencing monetary policy, because that would be inflationary, and Ron and I agree on that. And we also say one of the things the audit will show you is what the Federal Reserve buys and sells. And that will be made public, but not instantly. Because if that was made instantly, you would have a lot of people trading off of that, and it would have too much impact on the market. Again, Ron agrees with that. So we will probably have that data released after a time period of several months, enough time so it wouldn't be market sensitive. That'll be part of the overall federal regulation that we are adopting.
By the end of the year?
The House will pass it probably in October.
The Federal Reserve System, to most people, seems like it is an agency of the federal government. That's what I thought it was when I first started to research this topic. But it turns out that it's nothing of the kind. The Federal Reserve is a hybrid organization. It's a partnership between the federal government and the private banks. When you look at it deeper than that, its essence is neither as a government agency or a private company. In reality, it is a cartel. In other words, it's no different in essence than a banana cartel or a sugar cartel or an oil cartel. It's a grouping of the large private corporations in the field, banking, who have come together to create agreement between themselves to limit competition, to preserve their profits, and to make sure that no newcomers come in and take away their position. That's what cartels are always designed to do. And it's a shocking thing to realize that something as prestigious as the Federal Reserve System, at its core, is nothing more or less than a banking cartel with exactly those same objectives. The Fed was formed not in Washington, D.C., not in the halls of Congress or some meeting room, but it was formed on a private island off the coast of Georgia called Jekyll Island. This island in those days was a club called the Jekyll Island Club. And Its members were a relatively small group of billionaires from New York, people like J.P. Morgan, William Rockefeller, and their business associates. When they went to the island, they all traveled aboard the private railroad car of Senator Nelson Aldrich. This was November of 1910, and he and 6 other men were told they mustn't be seen together, they couldn't dine together on that evening, and they must avoid newspaper reporters at all costs. One of them carried a shotgun. Just in case he had been confronted by a reporter, he was prepared to tell them that he was going on a duck hunting trip. When they got on board this railroad car, they were told not to address each other by last names, first names only. And 2 of them even went further, and they adopted code names. They were concerned that the identities of all of these 7 men might be known to the servants on board the car, and that the servants might talk about it. In that fashion, the word would get out. Even when they got to the island and went to the clubhouse, they had replaced all of the normal servants with new servants who didn't know any of these people. And they created the Federal Reserve under those kinds of conditions of great secrecy. I can assure you that very few wars of history have ever been plotted under conditions of greater secrecy than that. In those days, there was a great deal of concern among the American people about the concentration of financial power in the hands of a few very wealthy and powerful financial interests in Wall Street. They called this the money trust. And the cry in those days was to break the grip of the money trust. And one of the primary purposes of the Federal Reserve Act, as it was promoted to the American people, was just that, to break the grip of the money trust. They were going to write a law that was going to take the power away from these people and put it in the hands of their trustworthy politicians, put it in the hands of the people through the electoral process. That was the propaganda behind the Federal Reserve System. So what's the purpose of the secrecy? It's because when you look at the list of these people who went, they were the money trust. They were the representatives of the banks, J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers. They represented Kuhn Loeb and Company, Warburgs in Germany and the Netherlands, and the Rothschilds in England. This was the money trust, not only of the United States, but of the world. Had that fact been known, who these people were that were drafting the Federal Reserve System, the trick would have been exposed, and the public never would have adopted the Federal Reserve Act as, in fact, they did.